even less to talk to one of them, and then you have 5 of them. So you put me in a very, very difficult spot, but without spending too much time, so the topic is around Gen Z. It's an issue which is personally close to my heart. It's an area we work a lot at MASH, and each of the panelists have had a great opportunity of knowing them personally as well, and doing fantastic, fantastic work, right? We hear stories like Greta Thunberg to, at our home, like so many young people who are doing some brilliant work. And this is one of the greatest assets also we have, our own young population and young generation. So how do we channelize that asset we've got to do something very, very meaningful, right? I won't spend much time in introductions because I think I may not do justice, but I want to do quick opening thoughts in terms of just introducing yourself and the work you do with young people, and then we're going to get into the discussions. So maybe if I can start with you, Sejal, first, and then we can go through the entire round, right? Yeah, sure.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having us here, and in the end we'll make sure we clap for him for his wonderful energy, because he's just brought so much more. Well, hi, I'm Sejal. I've been a content creator for 10 years now, and I also diversified into music and acting, so that's about me. And in terms of the work that I do in the social space, I've worked at length with UNICEF. We just launched a campaign with them called Finding Joy, which is about mental health and spreading awareness. I'm also a fellow goalkeeper, and I've worked with Michelle Obama to raise awareness about girls' education. And overall, my audience is mainly women, so a lot of my work just tends to cater to them and their needs.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sejal. Nishita, over to you.
Thank you so much, Aashish. I just want to take a few extra seconds and congratulate you for bringing such unusual actors together to talk about Gen Z with Gen Z on the panel. Yeah. Very fortunate to be at the intersection of public, private and youth engagement, working with stakeholders like you, Sejal, who's incredibly passionate about mental health, Rohit, who has been working so passionately with young people and training them, empowering them on how to use social media better, Anoushka, who was a YPAT member with Generation Unlimited India before she took on a global role, and she's been at the heart of designing a lot of our programs in the past, and it's a privilege to be on this panel today. I work with UNICEF YuWaah. I play a very small part of just connecting public, private and youth stakeholders through stories of young people, creating them with the young people.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Nishita. Rohit.
Hi, thank you so much, Aashish, for calling me here. And before I begin, I just want to preface my introduction by the fact that in recognition of my growing lot of white hair, I do want to stay upfront that unfortunately, I am not Gen Z. And so don't claim to speak on their behalf, but have been an observer, so would want to sort of add comments like that. And I think as many of us here who have grown up perhaps before the internet was fully mainstreamed, I think we can bring in a vantage point of how things are different with this generation than the previous, right?
Absolutely.
And so we at YLAC, so I run an organization called Young Leaders for Active Citizenship. I'm also a public policy professional, and what we try and do is to see how young people can be more engaged with democracy and how we can use their energy to try and push for social change and also more accountability in governance. And we do that through fellowships, programs, identify talent and then groom them. And that's been my experience of working, and hopefully I'm going to be able to bring some
Absolutely. And at that point, sorry Anoushka, I'll come to you, but I just feel like each one of them has so much value, and like I said, I've had a opportunity to know them. So among audience, I think I would really request if you maybe, I don't know how much time you're going to have today, but maybe in the tea break on it, just to sort of mutually, the ideas of coming to forums is just not to listen to each other, but it's also to connect and build these engagements and partnerships from here on. And I could see on the other side of the room also there are some amazing folks there. So if there's an opportunity available, do connect with each one of them and vice versa. And so much I can feel like we can take back and build on. So Anoushka, yes.
First of all, it's such an honor to be in the presence of such icons. My name is Anoushka. I am a Gen Z social entrepreneur, a human rights activist. I started my journey when I was 10 years old. I'm 22 right now. So yes, I do have a decade of experience doing social impact and advocating and championing women and girls' rights. I'm also one of the youngest advisors to the World Bank at this moment from India. And yes, as Nishita mentioned, thank you. I've been working with Generation Unlimited, Limited and UNICEF as a part of the Young People Action Team. I work on the intersections of gender, health, climate, and ensuring every young person has access to their rights without fighting for it. And yes, goalkeepers represent.
Superb, amazing. Thank you, Anushka. And it's so exciting, like 10 years. I'm just thinking what I was thinking at 10 years, right? So you should definitely like hear more from you on that, Aradhana.
Hi everyone, I'm Aradhana Gupta. I'm the co-founder of this organization called Project Baala. I've known Aashish for the last 2 years now, so it's an incredible honor just seeing him shine every month, every year. But my organization is basically a menstrual health organization. We also focus on sexual and reproductive health. I am also not a Gen Z, but 70% of our work is around Gen Z. Anyone between the age of 12, whoever's menstruating, up until, what is the Gen Z age right now, 27, 20, 27, 26. All those menstruators we work with. And very excited to be here today, Aashish. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, and thank you for those kind words. All right. So, the way I divided it, I thought we can touch upon 2-3 things. We definitely have shortage of time. So, we're going to definitely talk about social media. Everybody, looks at the bad side, good side. But I think there is a lot of potential on using social media for good. And I know each one of you uses or are directly, engaged with that. So I'm going to just open this question to first both Nishita and Rohit, given, you're on that intersection where you work with also multi-stakeholders. And at some point, of course, I also want to bring Sejal into that. You're, of course, one of the most well-known. When the first time I met Sejal, I had a fan moment. I asked her, can I take a selfie with you? Over the years, of course, we just took one outside as well. So, but you have such a deep impact on a lot of young people. So would like to also hear your thoughts. So, simple question, how do you see these media platforms influencing our Gen Zs, right? And what do you see like some of these trends among the work that you do with Gen Z, right? So maybe we can start with you, Nishita.
So I did think a lot about this question because I'm not a Gen Z myself, and I spoke to about 5 Gen Zs in our team, which is 80% Gen Zs. One of them is here, Shubhangi, who leads our digital work for youth engagement and climate. And very interesting insights from them, not so much from me. One is, as the Gen Zs have grown up, I think social media has played the role of a friend in some manner. Yeah. What millennials or boomers would typically consider friendships for, which is, asking questions, sharing thoughts, expressing themselves, finding different interest-based groups. I think all of those areas have now been replicated in some manner by social media. So I think Gen Zs have a very unique sort of space where their expression is through social media. Right. They have a safe space in a way that they feel this is the place where we can express ourselves, right. Whether it's about climate, mental health, gender, equity, rights, all of those areas. I think it is influencing how Gen Zs are initiating very crucial dialogues, creating awareness, and also sort of closing the loop with advocacy. There are some incredible young people we work with who are grassroots champions, who mobilize their communities for a beach cleanup drive, for example, and you've worked with us on so many of those, right? They are using social media to create awareness about what climate change is. They are bringing stories from the ground, which they have created by mobilizing other young people from social media. And they're using social media as a platform to also engage policymakers, private sector, philanthropies, and implementation partners to see here, here we are, these are the issues that matter to us. This is how we are taking action, and here's our story we want to share with you. Would you like to be a part of it? And if you disagree, we'll call you in to the conversation, will not call you out. And another thing that came up from the people that I spoke with in the morning, they said that social media for them is a double-edged sword in some sense. When they consume news on social media, it's all gloomy. Yeah. But when they see the lives of other people on social media that they're following, they see everything is positive. So they're very they're at an intersection of whether, okay, the world is all sad, but my friends are all doing well. where do I sort of, am in the mix? So a lot of them sort of take a step back from social media as well. But I think people like Anoushka here and Sejal here have been using social media to its truest potential. And I think that's the role social media can possibly play if Gen Zs or young people can inspire us also actually in some manner to explore what are the positive sides of using social media and how do we really create a movement with it and tell the right stories, right?
Thank you. Rohit, over to you.
No, firstly, I want to start by saying I completely echo, what you're saying. I think, so in YLAC, one fellowship in particular that we used to run, to which Sejal has also, I think, come as a speaker once or twice. We used to run this fellowship called the Counter Speech Fellowship. And the idea of that fellowship was that how do you use art for advocacy and how do you use social media to drive positive narratives on some themes, right? And Gen Z resonates a lot with certain themes such as climate and sustainability, inclusion, social equality, including gender. They used to work on these themes, create content, and then use the power of social media to sort of amplify it and build communities, right? So I have definitely noticed that it has allowed marginalized voices to come to the fore because, traditional gatekeeping, in fact, when we also started YLAC and we were trying to reach young people, we realized that if you go through the usual channels, which is schools, etc., there's a lot of gatekeeping that happens because obviously the older guard is gatekeeping those in. But social media allows you to bypass all of that. That is one thing we'd noticed. The second is that when you are speaking from a very unique or a minority voice in a particular area, you often don't find community immediately in your neighborhood. So it breaks those barriers and you're able to form a larger community. And you're able to mobilize faster. So we could see all of that happening very well, and I could definitely see the power of social media in helping Gen Z and even others, in fact, do that. Having said that, I have also seen some of the potential downsides. In fact, in the new avatar of the Counter Speech Fellowship, we have changed the model where we have brought on-ground mobilization also into it. Because oftentimes what used to happen is that online activism would stay at online activism. It would become performative at some times. And it would really not move the needle. And coming from a public policy background, I could also see that policymakers would not give it as much value because they felt that this is only online. This is concerning a special class of people, but it is not mainstreamed. The second thing that I used to notice is, and I still think that it has an impact, is that when you are mobilizing across geographies or when you're connecting with people, I think sometimes there's a lack of appreciation of the dynamics of social change. Social change, so for instance, as an example, LGBTQ rights, right? The conversation had started moving in Western democracies much before it started moving in India. And then in India, because of social media and everything, it picked up pace in the last 5-10 years. I went to IIT. When the time I went, there were no LGBTQ clubs on campus. It was absolutely hush-hush. But within 10 years, I have noticed a massive kind of a shift, right? But unfortunately, society does not move at the same pace, right? So when a very strong idea clashes with a conservative setup, and it has not allowed time for that setup, for those ideas to percolate, it can lead to conflict. And I feel that that is something that we have to be careful about. And sometimes also I feel that the echo chamber bit is also getting accentuated, which because you found your community, you sometimes are not willing to engage with the ones outside. And these are some of the things that I think we have to be very mindful of, even as we speak about social media.
Got it. I'll want to bring in Sejal, and take her perspective in terms of being a, a well followed, and a lot of young people do follow your content. So, how do you navigate, in terms of what kind of issues you want to advocate, and how do you also draw that line between where you think that this maybe my consumer I don't know how they will react to it or all, right? So what kind of strategies or thought as a content creator that you would have to keep in mind?
Yeah, great question. I also want to share a little bit of a story. As they were talking, I thought of this, the impact of social media in general on social impact. I have a younger cousin. She's 17, but she's on the spectrum, so she behaves like she's much younger. That makes her really pure, to be honest. She shared a story with me yesterday that she was in the car with her parents, and her parents are slightly more conventional. They're you know, so whatever, she was talking about the war that's happening, why are people dying, and she also she's speaking now about feminism, which is really nice to see as a young girl, she's talking about it. But she told me that her parents instantly said, "Arey, ye to Sejal jaisi ban rahi hai," with like, with like a sarcastic tone. While that pissed me off, to be honest, but it also made me really proud of her because she still spoke her mind, and it's cool for young people to be aware of these topics and go head to head with grown-ups that might not agree with them. And the only resource she has to even know what the word feminism means is Instagram and YouTube. And that's amazing. I didn't have that when I was in school. All of us have a tinge of misogyny in us, everybody in this room. And our jobs as we grow up is to realize more of that. And as I was in school, we did a lot of things that were very problematic, but we grew out of it because we had exposure to social media. So it has a massive impact. From my perspective as a creator, if you see my older content, I also started out when I was 19. So I did or said certain things which had that like internalized misogyny bit in them, but I grew as I went. And my only goal with what I share is to first become a better person myself and be empathetic and then talk. Because I do believe in people being responsible when they have a platform. There's so many creators who put out stuff that's so regressive, so sexist, and it has a massive impact on people who are watching. So I think that's highly irresponsible. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Sejal. I think very interestingly, we are also seeing a lot of these movements being built, like Rohit highlighted, Nishita has highlighted. But it's also interesting to see, like, given the scale of problems we have, we need many more young people coming out, more people like Anoushka to stand up. So I'd like to come to Anoushka and understand, Anoushka, like you yourself a Gen Z, your work also impact and influence a lot of Gen Zs and young people in the near sector. So what do you think is actually the driving force among this generation? You know, what do you think that makes me make them like take a stand for a cause, right? And then would also like to understand from your own experience, like how is social media really helping him then voice these issues out, build a movement, scale it to the right sort of stakeholders, right? Yeah.
That's a great question, and I think it's the need of the hour for us as Gen Z and for Gen Alphas and the generations coming after us. We're at a tipping point, right? If we don't take action now, who else will? We're at the stage where we're the inheritors of the future, which looks very bleak at this point. We are supposed to take over all of the burdens that the older generations have pushed onto us, be it climate change, be it inequalities, be it the stereotyping, anything. And so for me as a young person at 10 years old, when I saw inequalities around me, and I saw young girls being pushed out of school, or female infanticide, or girls not being able to get access to their menstrual health necessities, I asked my mom, who's a great champion in my life, and she's been the one who's inspired me deeply, what can I as a 10-year-old do? And she said, a lot. A lot. If you're a 10-year-old, you do know a few things that a 5-year-old doesn't. And so she said, just start by looking around people who are younger than you, get them to your home, ask them questions. What do they need help with? How can you help them? So I started by tutoring one single child. That was the child of a daily wage earner who used to work in front of our home. And I'd see that child never going to school, always in front of dust, asbestos, not doing anything. So I got them to my home, I tutored them, and then I saw that they started getting grades. They got a B plus, an A, and then I said, okay, as a 10-year-old, I can make that difference. So from that one kid, I went to 100 children, 100 to 150. And then now with the foundation that I have, which is named in the memory of my father, it is called the Anupam Foundation. It is an entirely grassroots, youth-led foundation. We work with Gen Zs, with younger people. We make sure that they get access to mentorship with peer-to-peer communities where they feel supported and seen, and we get them access to education. So what it really did is it sparked in me the idea that no matter what my age is, where I come from, what my background is, or what my expertise is, if I have a degree or not, I can still make a difference. So that really sprung me into action. And social media is another great tool. But before the dawn of social media, we used to have radios and we used to have televisions. And I work with people who necessarily do not have access to smartphones or data connections or internets. So I became one of the youngest radio jockeys at the time in the country. I was 12 years old. And I worked with the Ministry of Telecommunication. And so what I did is I used to go into these rural areas, ask these girls what are the issues that they're struggling with. So I first used radios to tap into these issues, understand what they're struggling with, and then talk to them about it. And then at 14 is when I started working with UNICEF with a TB, measles, and rubella campaign. And then at 17, I became a part of the Young People Action Team. And then ever since, I've been mobilizing social media to reach out to masses and people, even if they disagree with me, even if they don't agree with the facts that I state, to just spread awareness, to spark that dialogue. And it's been really helpful that ways.
Amazing. I think a big round of applause for Anoushka. Is so inspiring to hear. A 10-year-old, you started, one thing I really felt like, we always talk about, you have to take that one step, right? And issues that are closest to you, you can see the impact. Like that one kid who started going to school, the great scorer, and that's where the movement begins, right? So I think, especially for us who work with young people or having young people who we work with, I think issues that they can feel like closely connected. You don't have to start with something, big, it's that one step, right? Sorry, Rohit, you wanted to add something?
I was just going to say that.
Sorry, your mic is not on, I guess.
I was just going to say that all of our CV pales in comparison to hers.
Great, Aradhana, so Aradhana, I know Project Baala does a lot of work with, different spaces which brings together young people, be it schools, be it other setups, out of school programs. So from your experience, again, the same question in terms of how do you see these setups, which influences young people? Taking it beyond social media now, so where you talk about even families and peers, right? So that I'm talking about the influential groups that would help Gen Zs take a charge. So from your experience, if you can shed some light and share your thoughts, what are the different ways these stakeholder groups, or I would say setups, can also be oriented, so then they know how to sort of engage with the Gen Z better.
Of course. So, like I had mentioned, 70% of our work is with Gen Zs, be it our volunteers, be it our team, be it the groups that we're targeting, men, women, girls, whoever. And we've seen a very common value system in Gen Zs, and I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn, but it's sustainability, inclusivity, and equity. These three values we've seen across all our volunteers. They really, really emphasize on all three of these. And if we can create spaces that fosters these, that promotes these, that encourages them to think about these three values, it really makes a lot of difference. Coming to stakeholder groups, if you talk about, let's say, schools, for example, there should, and I have been talking to Delhi schools about this, there should be a social impact curriculum. Now, finally, instead of just you having your usual accounts, history, whatever, maths, science, English, why don't we have a social impact education system where young boys and girls are taught about global challenges, how to tackle them, those kind of things. That is a very, very easy thing to do, in my opinion. I went to a convent school for first 3 years of my life. We had those moral science classes, but I mean, what were they even teaching? But if we can have something along those lines, it could be great. Families and schools could also foster a space where dialogues can be openly, discussed, like things about gender roles, things about good touch, bad touch, consent. Those, if you start talking about at the age of 8, 10, 12, such a good thing for young girls and boys to learn about. Coming to policy level things, we are still trying to push for a menstrual policy India-wide, which is not happening. We are still taxed for period products. But it's so interesting to see Gen Zs come up with innovative ideas to fight those. I've had volunteers come in my team saying, why can't we just name a menstrual cup as a reusable sanitary pad, because there's an 18% GST on the cup and not on a pad. I'm like, you can't do all of this, but they have so much innovation in them, and if we can just bridge that gap between our experience and their innovation, a lot could come out of it.
So I think you're saying that engaging young people in more decision making is also very, very important and critical, right? And I think a lot of these spaces, especially I think UNICEF is doing some amazing work on that front in terms of getting young people voice. I know Anoushka and we were in New York recently at the UNGA, could hear like so many young people at the UN head office now are talking about issues that matters to them. So I think there's a lot of good work happening. Definitely there's a room to lot more. Okay, and I know that we do have some time, so of course I would definitely like to engage with the audience at this point. I've been told that we have some more time than what was I told earlier. So if any quick questions from the audience we can take now, otherwise I have a few more questions to ask the panelists as well. Okay, I see a hand there. Can somebody help with the mic there, please? Requested you to quickly introduce and keep your question precise to whom you're asking and what is the question, right?
Jai Hind, everybody. I represent from an armed forces and family background, and especially considering the Gen Z, I have a very humble request. The people in armed forces, the young generation is not joining, and we are more like a keyboard warriors. Love watching movies, playing PUBG, and the morale of the soldiers are getting down on a daily basis, right? The quality of manpower which is required to fight and be there at minus 50 degrees Celsius is very different as compared to what we generally talk. So I would definitely love, because we have seen many countries, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, now Syria. The moment the armed forces morale go down, all of these things becomes just a talk. So I would request that since you all are social motivators, and considering that today is a very pious day, today is a Vijay Divas, where India-Pakistan war was won, more than 50 years back. So I'll request all of you that, do you think this can be included in your pep talk or in your TED talk or whatever talks, right? That to join the forces, or at least to motivate them who wish to join the forces, because we talk all other things apart from serving the nation, or assume that what happens at the grassroots level to the martyr families who also have a different expectations from the citizens and Gen Z. Thank you.
Thank you. Sejal, you want to talk?
Thank you. Actually, I had thought maybe I have an appropriate answer, but I was just going to decide against it. No, sir, actually my parents were also in the army, so I completely empathize. They are not serving anymore. My father served for 16 years and my mother was a major and doctor, both in the army. I completely empathize. I honestly don't know how to answer appropriately. I was going to say no.
Anybody else in the panel? Yes, Rohit.
So, sir, completely understand. And so, for instance, when we work, so the organization that I run is Young Leaders for Active Citizenship. The idea is that you are getting young people to understand their agency and then tell them to look around more carefully to see what is wrong in society and in the country and in the nation and how to improve it. Armed forces is one way of sort of dealing with it, or trying to strengthen the nation. Similarly is politics and other citizen activism on the ground, including working on issues. So the way we work is that to first build that consciousness that you have to take responsibility for the setup that you are in, right? Nobody is going to come from outside and try and fix it for you. And then, as she was mentioning, give early exposure to people, because typically when people start working on something, they realize that they have more power than they had anticipated. And that is really the path that people then start sort of doing. So when you are looking at a young person, especially a high schooler, getting them started on local issues first really builds that agency. And I do think that you are ultimately building active citizenship and taking responsibility for society, and some of them will end up in the armed forces as well. I mean, at least that's my viewpoint. I think, yeah, let me just stop there.
Sure. Any other comments from the panel? Otherwise, we can take more questions. Yes, I see a hand there.
Hi, I'm Shilpi. I'm from IP Global. The question is open for anybody at the panel, but I just want to also clarify to the point that you guys mentioned regarding, making building awareness early. So, I'm talking about, I'm a mother of two, and there is a lot of awareness nowadays even built right at the school level. So, there are lots of schools which have actually consciously started doing things like, the good touch, bad touch programs, the safety drills, the environment consciousness. This has actually become a mandate. So, I mean, I don't know if it's really, the idea is that it should translate to every school, but yes, I think steps are being taken. And I'm talking about not just the schools, also at colleges. So I think probably that's where we've made headway. The question that I've actually written that question, so just a second, please. We've talked a little about, how can we actually, we've talked about, how it is an enabler. But my question is, how can actually Gen Z bridge the gap between, actually there's a lot of talk about unequal access to resources and platforms when we're talking about Gen Z. How can that, that gap be
Barrier,
bridged
yeah. Okay.
to actually enhance the role of Gen Z in driving social
So
change?
you're talking about digital access and
yeah,
digital
and
equity.
resources and platforms, both.
Got it. Nishita, you want to take that?
What's your name?
I'm Shilpi.
Shilpi,
Yeah.
thank you for that question.
Yeah.
I want to share 2 quick points on this, and then I'll sort of pass it on to the panel as well. One thing is we do recognize at UNICEF YuWaah the power that Gen Z holds, but also why technology itself has to be an enabler and cannot sort of further deepen the divide that already exists. So we think at the grassroots level, there is an opportunity for us to engage with not just impact organizations, but also youth volunteers themselves to help us take digital literacy to each home, especially to rural women, especially to the most marginalized. We work on a program, for example, called Passport to Earning, along with Microsoft and Accenture. And we've done this with about 3 million young people from every single state and union territory in India. Our model is very simple. You have support at the community level of a person who will help out the young person in terms of a 10-hour course that covers all of the aspects of how to use different forms of Microsoft Office, for example. There is, there's an introduction to AI and how that can help in things like resume building, which ultimately helps you sort of, look for economic opportunities later on. But something like this, and I heard a panelist just before ours, talking about digital literacy on its own. That's one aspect of it. And the other aspect is also sensitization of parents and teachers themselves as well. Because I think social media or digital can also be looked at as something that is restricting young people from the parents' perspective, perhaps. They might look at censorship as one of the areas of concern, especially for young people. Instagram, for example, is not open in a few countries for children below 16 years of age. So how do we enable first access to digital and then later on to social media to discover more, but ultimately looking at that entire package to access learning and then ultimately to financial independence? That path is very important, and the most critical aspect of it is how we bring teachers, policymakers, educators, community leaders, faith-based organizations, as well as public, private, and youth stakeholders and content creators on the same platform.
Thank you so much for that question, Shilpi. So as a young person who's been working with other young people in rural India, I did notice that there's a lot of divide, especially the digital divide, as you mentioned, Nishita. So what Generation Unlimited does is with the Young People Action Team members. I'll give you 2 examples. First is with the Young People Action Team. So for young people who are unable to access internet, who are unable to join our meetings, they provide you with stipends. They try to bridge that divide where you can get access to data plans or devices if you are unable to do so. With my foundation, what we do is we have this multi-stakeholder partnership with like public libraries, NGOs, all those people who can lend their resources, be it gadgets, laptops, computers, phones, so that these children that I work with can take after-school classes on those devices. So it's a program called Scholarback. It's backed by Rutgers, and I started this when I was 19 years old, and now we have 20,000 young people are using those services. And then again, as you said, not everyone has access to, as I said previously, not everyone has access to smartphones or mobiles. So what we do is we use radios, even today. to get them through the important information that they need to know about their rights, about their advocacy rights, whatever they need to know as a young person in India today is how we do it through Scholar Pack.
Aradhana, you wanted to add to that?
Just two quick points about tangible things that I do at the organization, and I also run my family philanthropy office. At the organization, what we end up doing is we have this line where we say that we are building capacity for younger people, but we're leaving a lot of room for innovation. And that we make sure, even if we send someone on the ground to raise awareness on menstrual health, sexual health, we let them handle the workshop in the way they want to. So it's not just a script that you have to follow. There's a lot of innovation. Someone will come up with a nukkad natak, someone will do like a music show, someone will want to do a dance performance. We leave it to the volunteers in their own way to innovate on how they want to. Coming to the philanthropy office point, I do think a lot more importance and funding should be now given to younger students, younger children, just because there is a huge boom of entrepreneurship in India. Even the Zepto founder, I think, is a Gen Z, right? Yeah. So just picking up on the pulse of things, every month we have meetings with younger and younger people. We have 15-year-old people who pitch their business ideas to us. Just giving them that space and opportunity to do that, I think could be one way to increase the role of Gen Zs.
Thank you, Aradhana. I think we're running out of time, so we can start wrapping up. And I think it's we can continue to go on. I was in a very interesting workshop. So we do this project with Reckitt on sexual reproductive health, and there was a whole discussion around Gen Z and how that sort of like trends, and brands are also constantly trying to figure out and crack what really works, right? So I think it's a continuous process where we need different actors, all of us, to come together and create more platforms where we can have, like Nishita spoke about and many of our panelists spoke about, to have Gen Z be part of that discussion and not just create programs which is just sort of like not like built for them without putting them in the center of the discussion. But any closing thoughts from each of our panelists, like while I put it, but wanted to really understand, like when you work with different decision makers, so any call to action that you think that we can take away from your experience. So, this is also going to get recorded and pushed out on various media handles. So how can they, while they're designing their programs, can look at some of these key learnings and insights which can continue to positively influence Gen Z? Whosoever wants to go first.
I can start.
Yeah, Radha.
Like Rohit said, I think we only have one Gen Z on the panel, and her CV is way ahead of ours. They are way ahead in years, I would say, in terms of experience, innovation, everything. So give them the space to be themselves and do that. Give them the space to have a very open dialogue, because they come up with the most interesting ideas. I would also say understand the values that drive Gen Zs. They are not the same as us. They're actually not the same as us. And I've seen that through social media. So understand those values and try bringing change with them and not for them. Even their lingos and language is very different. There are certain pages which just break down what you will call these words. I was like, what? I've never heard this. Yes, Anoushka.
I think a very important motto that all of us young people go by is nothing for us without us. I think all of the governments, leaders in the room, from CSOs, from private sector, need to recognize us as equal partners, collaborators, co-creators, and people who can shape these policies and programs with them. We're not someone who should just be handed down these policies or programs, because at the end of it, who is it? Who's the person who's inheriting these programs? It's us. So we should be considered as equal partners. And finally, invest in youth-led and youth-focused solutions is what I want to say if we want to consistently and sustainably keep on supporting young people.
Brilliant. Thank you, Anushka.
I just want to build on what I said earlier, that when we start engaging with young people, the first thing sometimes you hear from people is that they're very cynical about the whole system, especially governance ecosystem, and what is it that really can change, and how much power do I have to change it. So I think to the point that she said, institutionally, if policymakers can create more forums for people to get involved, and unfortunately I think in India's democracy, unlike in say some Western democracies, those spaces are not there. Like in cities, in many different Western democracies, there are spaces where people can come and take charge and participate, right? And giving those early experiences of participation fuel your journey into social impact and, you know, to trying to take leadership. I think that is missing. So firstly, that is something that we should definitely do. And secondly, I think we looked down upon political mobilization in our campuses. Nobody is saying that external political parties need to be involved, but I got my first steps towards all of this is because I contested 3 or 4 elections in IIT campus, which is completely sanitized, not like DU politics, if I may say so, which meant that I had to go door to door campaign, and that really helped me understand what that could do and what I could do to push the ecosystem to become better, right? So I think letting our campuses be spaces where young people can mobilize, protest if they want to, and question authority, I think that is something if we start doing, we'll really sort of set the groundwork.
And even at a younger level, not just college. That's schools are a great place to begin with, right? Yeah. Sure.
I would like to add on to what Anushka already said. You know, young people are not beneficiaries. They have to be equal partners. So I think the first thing is recognize that they have a different perspective, which is which is equally, if not more important than that of those who are there on the table making decisions. So they have to be a part of it. Secondly, empathize. You know, understand that Gen Zs and younger people have not grown up in the same way that others would have. Their challenges are different. Their exposure is different. Their triggers for mental health would be different. Their understanding of the world would be different. So empathy is very, very important. So just by virtue of the first point that I made, having them on the table, you cannot be patronizing. You have to really empathize with what they bring to the table. And lastly, have them socialize their ideas to more and more and more decision makers. They might be a part of one consultation here and another there, but are we able to help them, like Anushka said, help them mobilize funds, for example? Are we able to help them in some capacity building? Are we able to take them to the communities who can be so inspired by the work that these young people are doing? Or can we connect them directly to policymakers, to the government, to various ministries? We have a program called National Youth Climate Consortium, NYCC, which we work very closely together on. The young people who represent all parts of the country come in with different issues that they are working on as grassroots entrepreneurs, and their solutions are not just discussed with the private sector and the philanthropies and other youth-led organizations, but also the Ministry of Environment directly. Yeah. So can we play a role in taking them, taking maybe 100 miles, even more, in terms of enabling their passion, their creativity and their entrepreneurial
even global
ventures.
Forums like COP is a very good example how UNICEF is enabling that between.
And just going back to what both of you said, that you were at Anga this year and young people were speaking. 2019 is when Generation Unlimited was launched at Anga by the Secretary General, and the idea, the tagline is nothing without us, nothing for us without us. Yeah. And to see that shift in 6 years, where most of the you saw so many young people speaking.
Yeah, Sanjana was doing the closing at the Summit of the Future. That was so inspiring to see.
That's how advocacy happens, right? You initiate dialogue and you normalize it. And you normalize it to the point that a panel without Gen Z will be incomplete, no matter what you're discussing in the room.
Wow, so that's a feedback to the organizers. Next year, you've got to have a young person on the panel. Final comments from Sejal.
I'd like to say that this is referencing a campaign I mentioned earlier. I worked with Michelle Obama, and the campaign was for girls' education. And the approach I took was education begins at home. All of us here are advocates, right? But we may go back to a home environment, even with the most educated parents, where if you make a comment about, say, my mother's driving or her handling the finances or anything like that, you're kind of shamed for having an opinion, even till today, which is really sad. And I feel that everybody in this room, अगर आपके घर में कोई छोटा है, आप please उसे बोलने दो, and don't shame them for being curious or exploring and learning things from social media, because we might be very woke in this room, but none of that matters if you're a different person back at home.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And I'd like, with that thought, end this panel. And thank you to the Business World team for giving us this opportunity. You know, in fact, when we were building this partnership, I said we need to have a conversation on young people and Gen Z. So the fact like mainstream media platforms are prioritizing among so many issues they had to pick up on, which shows there's definitely a shift. But at the same time, there's also room for all of us to do a lot more. So thank you so much for being, and thank you to all the panelists for joining us today.
So
Thank you.
Aashish, quickly circling back to what you said towards the beginning, 30 minutes won't be appropriate. Was this time appropriate for you to conclude the
I
conversation?
think better, but we can do a lot more. There's
I'm sure.
never
I'm
enough
sure.
to talk about the Gen Z and these issues.
Right, perfect.